before we can start shaping the rear legs, we need to cut our mortises for our crest rail. So basically what we want to do is we need to find the location of the mortise we're going to make. To do that, we have to do some measurements. So the first measurement we're going to do is we're going to take our square, bring that up to the top of the rear leg, and mark down 1 1/8 inches. Then we drew that, so that would be the top of our crest rail. Then we drew another line that was 3 inches longer, so 4 inches and 1/8, which is this line right here. And this gives us a rough understanding of the length of our crest rail as far as the height is concerned where it enters the rear leg. The next thing we did was we drew the length of our mortise. So that length is 2 inches. So we took 1 1/8 inches down, added 1/2 inch on this side, drew a line, came here to 4 1/8 inches, subtracted 1/2 inch, and drew another line. This now gave us our 2-inch long mortise. We are not going to draw in our angle for the crest rail on this template. Just as a reference, I do want to tell you what it is. It's 13 degrees. I'm going to write that here real quick. So just like before, I'm going to take my little compass here, line it up with the line I striked with my square. I'm going to come over 10, 11, 12, 13 degrees. And on this side as well, I'm going to come in 10, 11, 12, 13 degrees. Now with our ruler, I can take my pencil and drop that in. And strike a line at 13 degrees. And I'll do that at both locations. What we're going to end up doing is making another template to help us do our routing. And we're going to rip a piece of MDF out from this sheet here. I set my fence at 8 inches wide. And the reason I set it at 8 inches wide is even though our legs are only 4 inches deep, I want some room for the router to sit on top of this piece when we make the initial mortise for our bushing. So what we're going to do now is just rip this board, and I want to keep it long too. I actually don't want to cut it to length because again, I want some additional support on the end of the leg height-wise as well as the end of the leg width-wise. So the first thing we want to do is I got my permanent marker here again, and I'm going to align my template against the template. And now the two, I'm flush here, I'm flush here on the bottom. I'm just going to draw in this shape. I want to transfer the mortise location from the template here to this template here. So I did the first one, and let's do the second one a little bit closer up. So I have moved my template, and I'm just going to take my square here and line up the top of the mortise with the square and just come down and make a mark. Perfect. Now we know the distance of our mortise. with the template now out of the way, I'm going to come in with my ruler and connect these lines. Doesn't have to be perfect. They're just start and stops. While we're still looking at this close up, we want to do a couple of other things. The first thing we want to do is we want to mark out the center point of both the top and the bottom. So I'm going to bring my ruler for my square here and take a look at this. So this first one is 14/16, right? So 14/16 is 7/16. So I'm going to mark it 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's 7/16. We'll come look at the other one. And we're going to find that location. So that's basically an inch, so that's a 1/2 inch. Now, with our bevel gauge set at 13 degrees, we want to verify what we just drew. So as I line up the bevel gauge to the 2 tick marks, yep, I thought I was going to be right. Definitely am. Both of these tick marks, when combined as one straight line, we're at 13 degrees. Now we have found the location of our mortise. Well, we've successfully marked the center of our mortise on our rear legs. The next thing we need to do is work on actually making a mortise here. So what I did was I have a set of bushings, and this bushing is 3/8 of an inch. Our mortise is going to be 1/4 inch. So here's my 1/4 inch bit. It's a spiral bit. So the 3/8 of an inch bushing and the 1/4 inch bit have enough room that I can use this bushing and this bit here. That we need to now come here and find the center, well, not center, but find the edges of this line where this bushing would meet. So basically what we need to do is we need to move out half of the width of this bushing, which by the way is the same dimension as our router bit that we use, at least that I use, for my mortises over there. This bushing comes in at 373, which is the same size as my 3/8 of an inch bit. Perfect. So what I need to do is mark over half of that distance on each side. So half of that distance, half of 3/8, 3/16. So with my ruler here, I'm just going to come in 3/16 of an inch on each side. Hopefully you'll be able to see it. I'm not going to use pin here. I'm going to use pencil this time. So I'm going to come here and just find my tick mark here. Locate my other tick mark and draw a line. Now I've got the outside of my bushing on one side and the outside of my bushing on the other side. So the idea now is that we create a mortise in this template with the router so that this bushing can travel on this path with our 1/4 inch bit inside of it. And as it travels along this path with the leg below it, we'll be able to mortise in our 1/4 inch mortise for the crest rail. Alright, I brought over that other sheet of MDF, that other large strip from the strip that we cut, which was 8 inches long, and whatever the width was of the other MDF template, or strip, I mean. I put that strip underneath because we're going to route through this and just barely into that one. I've clamped it down, and I made sure that the one on top protrudes out farther on this side than the one on the bottom, because we're going to have to use that extra protrusion here in a minute to find the location of our router. Now what you want to do is I pick the flat edge of my router base. I have my square here, and I'm referencing the edge of the square here, right here against the MDF, and I'm referencing the edge of the ruler against the router base, and I kept moving back and forth until I found a spot where the tips are both on that line. So now I know that this bit is centered in that location that we want to route out. So I'm going to take the router away. I'm going to draw in a line here. That line's right there. The next thing I'm going to do is grab my bevel gauge, and right now my bevel gauge is not set in the correct orientation. Okay, so now my bevel gauge 13 degrees changed, so it's running like this. I'm going to come and find the middle of this 1 inch mark, because the ruler is 1 inch long. So that's 1/2 inch. So what I've done is to extend my bevel gauge. As I have my straight edge running against it. And I think we're right there. This is once again at 13 degrees. We now drew a line that's going to be the reference for our fence. We might not be in the exact location, but we at least have something to start with. I got my ruler set against that line, and I can now see that I'm at the right spot, but I'm just over a little bit too much. So it looks like to me I'm over, I don't know, maybe about 2/16 of an inch. So what I need to do is just back this line up. So how do we go about doing that? Well, relatively simple. We just make 2 marks and we connect them. Eighth, I'm going to come back an eighth here. And then I'm going to come back an eighth right here. So since I came back an eighth of an inch back from the line, then I can now bring my straight edge there again, draw another line, and test my placement. So on the bottom I'm right there, but on the top of the mortise I'm off by just a tad. So I'm going to move the router, hold the ruler down, and I'm going to clamp one side of the fence down. And with one side clamped, I'm just going to move over just a little bit. And test my locations again. Perfect on the bottom. Lock that down. I'm off by just a little bit. I gotta loosen the clamp. Try it out one more time. Oh yeah, we're there. Yeah. Before I route this out, I need to make 2 more lines. I need to figure out the distance between the outer diameter of the bushing and the outer diameter of the bit. 3/32 of an inch. So I'm going to just err on the side of caution and say 2/16. So I'm just going to really quickly come here. Now these 2 locations, 2/16 of an inch up and roughly 2/16 of an inch down, will mark the beginning and end of our router cut. I've got the depth of cut set now, so the bit is just going to be just below the template. I have my 3/8 of an inch bit in, matching the outer diameter of my bushing I'm going to use. So now what we need to do is figure out how deep of a mortise we need to cut into this leg. With the template lined up on the leg, there we go. I'm going to come over here and mark out the mortise location. So I'm just going to transfer some ticks down, tick marks. With those tick marks made, I can now transfer the location of the mortise to the front of the leg. So with my square, I'm going to come here and draw the lines marking the mortise. I'm going to flip over the board and transfer that around. And now we know the location of the mortise on both this face and on this face. What I want to do is figure out how deep I need the plunge. Now you'll see here that the leg itself is curving right here. Okay, so we're going to lose some wood right here later, but it's roughly 1/4 of an inch. Okay. So that kind of takes us right to the line there. If our tenons for our legs were 3/4 of an inch long, I'm pretty sure making this 3/4 of an inch as well would be just fine. So if we're at 1/4 of an inch and we're going to go down 3/4 of an inch, which would be an entire inch. That line there will be the depth that we're going to plunge down to. I'm over here at the sanding station, and I've been sanding for a few, I don't know, maybe 20 seconds or so far. And basically I'm over here because the bushing, the length of the bushing itself is longer or deeper, however you want to look at it, than the 1/4 inch MDF I'm using for my template. This is a new bushing. I normally have one that's already been shortened, but for the purpose of the video, I got a new bushing so I can show you this. So you need to just come over here and sand down the length of the bushing so that it'll work with this 1/4 inch MDF template. Great, our bushing is now below the depth of our MDF template. I can definitely take my finger and not feel it at all. I got my bushing inside the router. I've got my depth of cut set for the bit. I have my other leg supporting the front of the template. Got the template clamped in. I've got this clamped. And we're ready to go. So let's route ourselves some mortise. I unclamped the template, and here's our first look at our mortise. The walls are really good. The only problem with the template is maybe we should have picked a slightly larger bushing to deal with, because the chips really had nowhere to go out. So for every single pass, I took it out, blew it out, did another pass, blew it out with some compressed air. But we're looking really good. I got the template unclamped. It's actually hanging up on the wall now. And here you have it. 2 legs with mortises at 13 degrees for our crest rail. I think we did a pretty good job. So what's the next steps here? The next step is we got to start shaping these legs. In order to shape these legs, we have to do some routing, and some template routing, that is. Before we can do the template routing, we have to make, let's take a guess, another jig. It's time to make the pattern routing jig for the legs. So I ripped off a strip 6 inches wide from some Baltic birch plywood. This is 1/2 inch thick. And then from another piece, and the length doesn't really matter. These look like they're more like 14 or 16 inches, but a good amount of length. I ripped myself 2 fences. This is 1 inch thick. Same here, these are 1 inch thick. And then from this, I cross-cut 2 1.5 inch long pieces that'll act as my stops to reference against. So I took my pattern and I made sure that it's flush against the Baltic birch plywood. I'm going to draw the shape of this piece in. So I'm going to take a pencil, and I have the piece starting a little bit early because I want to be able to start writing the bearing for the router bit before I actually hit the piece. So I'm going to come in. So the first fence I'm going to attach is the stop at the beginning, and this will help us reference the actual workpiece against the template. So I put a little bit of glue on this piece, and I'm bringing it over, and I'm making sure that it doesn't touch the edge of the plywood. And I got a couple of them, just going to shoot some brads in it. With some brad shot into that, now I'm going to grab another piece for my fence on the inside, which will be right over here. So I'm just going to put a nice light little strip of glue, make sure I'm flush, and then once again with a couple of brads I'm going to adhere this to the plywood below. I flipped the template around, and now we got to do the other curve of this leg. The other curve of this leg is much deeper, so in order to have a deeper curve, we need to place our piece even deeper into the actual template that we're working with. So I have my square. So on my new line at 1 3/4 inches, I can now line up my template, and with my template aligned, I'm going to do the same thing as before. I'm going to take a little bit of glue, and actually before I do the stop, I'm going to put the piece down for the fence. And the reason I'm putting the piece down for the fence is, how deep we're in doesn't really matter. All that matters is that the end of the template over here is within the plywood right now. Take a couple brad nails and shoot that in. With that fenced in, I'm now going to put my stop in, and I want to make sure that is set back from the edge of the template. I am now going to draw in the shape of the template. Right. So now with all of this attached, I'm going to real quick just extend the line down here a little bit. Basically, I want to be able to have the bit start riding the template with the bearing before it ever comes in contact with the wood, just to help you start the cut. And just real quick, I'm also going to extend the line on the other template at the end, as well as at the end over here. Now, even though these are curves, they're not drastic curves, and since they aren't drastic curves, a straight ruler can pretty much continue this curve for us. Okay, we're at the bandsaw now. We have our template here. And what we're going to end up doing is cutting our template on the bandsaw, but just proud of this pencil mark. So I'm going to say maybe a 1/16 of an inch on the other side, on the waist side of this pencil mark all the way up. And then I'll turn it around. And there is as much on this side, but nonetheless, we'll stay off on this side as well and proceed all the way to the top of this line. And I have my template, and I put down some double stick tape on the template. And I have my template here, so what we're going to do is lay our template against the fence, register it on both the back stop and the front, and just press down. And we need to be able to hold this piece down while we pattern route it. So our bearing is going to be on the bottom of the template and our cutter is going to be above. We're going to have to take a couple passes at this. For 4 inches tall, we have a lot of material to remove. I had milled up just two faces square to each other, and I cut them 4 inches long. And this is just some blocks. We need these 4 inches tall so that when we take our clamps and we affix those to the 1/2 inch plywood, we can then affix our clamps to the blocks and then clamp everything down. We don't want the blocks touching the piece, and we don't need them to be another fence. We need them off a little bit, and then with enough room that if we angle the block somehow, maybe, that it's putting pressure down the entire length of the piece and not on the cut side. So I think this may be a good spot too. So we got some pressure around here, we got some pressure back here, and we're going to hold this piece down. So now what we need to do is take our marker and mark out these locations. Let's take a look at where we can place our other blocks. So I've got 2 more blocks. I'm going to pull this piece away. I'm thinking somewhere here is pretty good for this one. And let's figure out this last one. Yeah, I think this is good right here. So now what I'm going to do is the same thing as before. I'm going to come back and mark these out. I know it's end grain, but I'm going to put a little bit of glue here. And with the glue there, I'm going to end up flipping this whole assembly over. Once it holds long enough that it's stable, I can flip it. And then with this flip, we're going to end up screwing into these so we can hold them down. I just grabbed a sanding block with some 80 grit paper on it. I'm gonna get rid of all the nice little fuzzies I made. All right, we are not going anywhere. Okay, I'm just finishing attaching these clamps, and what I did was I set my leg against both my fence and my index stop. And then I set my clamps on top. We're gonna cut this away, the waist, but I want the pressure to go down what will remain of the leg and it be applied right directly onto the plywood below. So I'm just gonna finish driving these in. We're not going anywhere. This is great. We got both these marked out. Let's go over to the bandsaw and cut out the waist. I made my cuts with the bandsaw. I've got my piece clamped into the jig. That's not going anywhere. Have a router bit in, and yes, this is William Ing's Big Daddy bit. It's fantastic. I just had it sharpened, I don't know, maybe a couple months ago, and I haven't really had it used for it yet, since the sharpening that is, and we're going to use it today. So if you do buy this bit from William, which I think everybody should, at least two, what you need to do is you need to make sure that you slow down your router speed. So at a super high speed, well, this thing's going to be going fast in the center, but it's actually going to be faster on the outside. So slow the speed down, and we want to take one nice clean pass. So these blocks that we have here are also going to help us too, because they're great for holding on to as we're moving this guy through. After completing the first pass on the template routing jig, I unclamp the leg, and now I do another pass using the material that was moved on the first pass as the template for the second pass. With that bit out, I've now switched over to a top bearing spiral cut bit, and I'm going to flip my piece over and route away the waist on the bottom with the bearing running on the top. I now have flipped the leg onto the other side of the jig and have affixed my clamps to hold it down. Now what we're going to do is route just a part of this leg. So we don't have to deal with everything back here because it's supposed to be flush. So what I want to do, and also we have the joinery here, and I don't want to even come close to that. So I made myself a little notch just when we start curving inward. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start routing at that point forward. Not before the notch, but only, not for the notch, but the line with my permanent marker. Only going to route from that part forward. Okay? Just like before, I removed the leg from the template and route using the material removed on the first pass as the template for the second pass. I then flip the leg over and use the top bearing bit to remove the remaining part of the waist. So we just finished routing the front shape of our legs for both of them, and it looks great. A little bit of hand work, it's going to be needed to clean these up, but nothing too crazy. Now that we have this done, the next step is to route the back curve of the leg. First thing we need to do is take our leg template and line it back up to the leg itself and grab our marker and redraw in this pattern. With the pattern drawn on both legs, what we want to do now is head over to the bandsaw and remove this waste. I'm probably going to attach my pattern now with double stick tape to the piece and then head over to the bandsaw and bandsaw it off with the piece on. And the reason I want to attach the template is if you take the bandsaw blade and you run it, the back of it, against the piece, you'll almost be following the actual piece itself. So when I say the back of the blade on the template. And also, it lets me know really how close I am. So either way, I like doing it that way in this situation, but you don't have to. I'm over here at the router table with my leg. I have my bottom bearing pattern routing bit installed. There's an enormous amount of the bit exposed. I'm just going to keep my hands far away and make sure I have these guys here, and I'm just going to walk it through. And I may end up stopping at a point where I want to pull back, regroup, and then just grab this end section here. And I finished pattern routing both legs, and the pattern's being a little bit difficult. It doesn't want to come off. There we go. So once again, if you do want to attempt pattern routing this, then I suggest you make sure you have as little material as possible between the bit and the edge of the template. Or always hand tools. You can cut real close to it and just come in and clean it up. Basically what we're going to do right now too, I want to clean these up real quick. I'm here, I'm looking at them. I can feel the surface. It's not perfect. There's some bumps here and here as well on the outside curve and on the inside curve as well. So I brought over the offcut from the bottom of this leg. I have the offcut for the bottom of that leg on my table saw right now. And what I did was I clamped the leg to the offcut. And what that's doing is providing us with support as we plane against the surface, preventing the leg from bowing inward and changing the shape of the leg. So I'm going to work this a little bit more with my spoke shave. I started with a block plane and tried to take all the high points out. And then while I'm here, I might as well take my smoothing plane and work this part of the leg as well. And while I've been doing that, I've also been checking for square. I have my square here. I cant the leg off the support a little bit, and I can just come in and yeah, I'm really good. This is good. So once you do that, just feather this piece right back in here. I'll just grab a block plane real quick and just work that. Perfect. Nice smooth transition. And if we take one of our rails, we want to make sure we have enough flat up here. So I'm going to grab the rail for this one. Here's the right rail. And here's where it goes. Perfect. So now that we have this side cleaned up, I'm going to turn it over and work on the other side. Okay, I turned the leg over onto this side. I'm now just going to clean the surface up just just ever so slightly. I don't want to take too much material away because this is the side that has the reveal for my rails, but I do want to smooth it out. I'm going to start where it's flat here, not back here. I'm going to deal with this in a little bit. Towards the back of the leg, we lose material and there's no support there, but here I have support. So I'm just taking my number 4, cleaning this up. I have a little bit of chatter marks down here from the router. Okay, now that I've done that, I'm going to work on the back of the leg here. And I'm going to take advantage of the fact that I have a bench I can clamp to. And I'm going to clamp the leg down. Grab the block plane. There's a little bit of chatter here. I'm dealing with that. Then I'm going to come into this transition right here. In order to work this face of the leg, I needed to raise the leg up. There's 2 pieces of 1/4 inch MDF below it, and that gets the leg above where it curves down into the bench. And so I'm able to plane it then. Right here is where we start to curve, and we need to clean this up as well. I flipped the leg around, clamped it to the bench over here. It's still raised up, and now I'm going to plane downhill. So I'm just going to start moving towards that direction. Okay, I turn the leg around to the other side, and I now have the other offcut below it here, and I've clamped the leg down below so it won't move. I know I got the bench dogs here, but I really need to clamp this leg so it's not moving at all. I'd really love to be able to somehow clamp the offcut, but it'll have to do right here, and it's probably not going to move much. So I just have my spoke shave, and that's why I have my water stones over here. I was just hand sharpening the blade real quick just to make sure we get some nice cuts here. And I'm just working downhill with the curve. I'm using these little pieces of MDF as clamping pads just to help prevent any marring of the wood, especially since I'm cleaning the surface right now. The last thing I want is to have to come back and do a lot of work on this later. The grain here is really changing directions a lot. I'm gonna this has a really fine cut on it right now, and just doing the fine cut with this, I'm able to work the surface. I know I'm going uphill and I shouldn't be going uphill, but with the way the grain's changing directions up here, this may be the direction to go in. We cleaned up this surface, the back, we cleaned up the outside surface, the inside surface, the front surface. Seems like to me we're good to go. I'm going to do the next leg, and then we'll clamp the chair up. Alright, everything's at 17 inches on top, 5 inches down below. Our rear legs look fantastic. I couldn't be happier. We have great reveal on the ends, or the edges of the rear legs on both sides. You know, we're shooting for 1/8 of an inch or a little bit more, and we're right there. We got great position for our mortises for the crest rail that we're going to use slip tenons for. And it's nice and smooth and looking great to me. So if you reach this point in the video and your chair is looking like this, you should definitely give yourself a big pat on the back and be a little bit proud. And that's okay, because it's a lot of work to get here.